We live in a world our ancestors would barely recognize. Around the globe, the impact of human ingenuity is now everywhere. We've pushed back the limits of our planet at speeds, depths, and heights that would have left our forebears breathless. Driving all these achievements is humankind's extraordinary gift for invention. Through genius and inspiration, we've created exceptional solutions to complex problems. From the everyday to the spectacular, some good and some not so good. This series celebrates the million ways our great inventions have transformed our world.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For humans, low temperatures can be deadly. But cold can also be fun. We love things cold as ice. Cold is good. It preserves. So we came up with a really cool invention that even expresses our personalities.
It's actually quite deeply personal and can be quite exposing about who you are, what you like, what you don't like.
We've learned tricks from our furry friends, making the most of natural resources. But in our development of this great invention, we've ended up harming our environment and put our planet in great danger.
It breaks down ozone, and ozone is the stuff that keeps us safe.
But this invention has done so much good, saving lives, even helped create lives. It has changed the way we live. It's played a part in the liberation of women.
And they were free to go and be more productive members of society.
Without it, the world would be a very different place. Most households have one.
It can be big, it can be small, some are the size of a house.
The biggest one ever built is circular. Its circumference measures a whopping 27 kilometers. This is the past, present, and future of the fridge. In almost every home that has electricity, you will find a white rectangular appliance with that signature hum. Fridges are vital for our modern lives, and we invest in them big time. The global market is predicted to keep growing. Most revenue is generated in China, over $26 billion in 2019. Buying a new fridge used to be a big deal in any household, a major purchase. These days, you can order a fridge one day and have it delivered the next. While all fridges keep things cold, some fridges themselves are cool, desirable luxury goods that come with a hefty price tag. But their environmental impact means the fridge must undergo a radical overhaul to remain a must-have machine. This innocent-looking product has changed the way we live and the way we eat. So how did people cope before the fridge? Fridges have transformed the way we preserve food, and it's hard to imagine life without them. But keeping food to eat later has always been a necessity. The story of refrigeration starts long before the invention of the fridge.
Having a world without a fridge, I think, would completely shift how we stock food, how long we can keep things, how much we rely on, the land and the weather and what is around us. And I think we'd have a much more immediate palate in terms of relying on what's grown.
We had various ways of trying to make our food last through the times when fresh food was scarce. We pickled vegetables in vinegar. We smoked meat and fish. Salting was another popular method to preserve meat for harsher times ahead. A cut of meat in a tub, completely surrounded and covered by salt, left out in cool weather, could last for years. Without stored foods, starvation, illness, and malnutrition are likely.
Even before the invention of the fridge, they were coming up with methods to store food. You know, all this sort of curing and pickling, all of that was to try and reduce the amount of bacteria in there.
However, it's another method of food preservation that has become the most popular. We'd figured out that keeping food as cold as possible made it last longer. This fundamental idea had been around for centuries, even as far back as the ancient Egyptians. Refrigeration. But thousands of years ago, electricity was yet to be discovered. So how did people keep food cold enough to avoid it going bad?
So the earliest forms of refrigeration are, of course, completely natural. I mean, absolutely the earliest form of refrigeration is just leaving something somewhere cold, whether that's outside overnight or whether it's in a cave or in something you've dug.
From the most primitive times, people started to put down roots and live in one place so they could store things. From then, civilizations through the ages and around the world learned to harvest ice from rivers and lakes in order to help preserve food. The Hebrews, ancient Greeks, and Romans had all developed a preserving technique. They had learned to place large amounts of snow into storage pits, then covered it with insulating materials like grass.
So you find the Romans bringing snow in and digging pits and filling it with snow so you can put your food in there. The ancient Egyptians apparently left jars of water outside overnight, which were then brought in so that they could be used to keep food fresh during the day.
For millennia, ancient civilizations have made their homes in the desert. To make their food last longer, cold storage was vital. But how do you keep ice in a desert? It might seem surprising that the answer lies in a country sandwiched between arid Arabian deserts and the subtropical Eastern European area, Iran, once known as Persia. The Persians are believed to have been the first to use cold storage to preserve food as far back as 400 BCE. They designed this building, called a yakhchal, as a type of earth refrigerator. It was cold enough to keep ice frozen in a deep storage area, while outside, summer temperatures were raging at 40 degrees Celsius or more. Ice could be cut and transported from the nearby mountains to get a head start. Or water could actually freeze inside a chilled yakhchal.
If you think of the first fridges, they're really called the ice houses that were made. What that meant for certain communities was a lot more of them are going to live through the winter because the food they'd harvested in the summer could be kept fresher. So it's really a matter of life and death, and I think that's probably the most fundamental transformation you can have. I've got a fridge, I live. I don't have a fridge, I die.
Storing ice in cold yakhchals kept it frozen to use in summer, when there was no ice. This was the forerunner to our modern thermal energy storage systems, such as solar panels. They trap heat from the sun during the day, which provides us with energy and heat when we need it. Humans are not the only species to have used cold to preserve food. Wild animals have been doing it for even longer. One creature that has perfected cold storage is the Arctic fox. Swedish research has shown that foxes store surplus food in the warmer summer months. In winter, when fresh food becomes scarce, they dig down into the permafrost for a well-hidden, tasty meal. The layer of soil under the snow remains below zero all year round, preserving the food for up to a year. it's not only the fox. The wolverine is another animal that uses cold to preserve its supplies. This wolverine will cache large chunks of meat scavenged from carcasses of other animals, burying it under ice and snow. Months later, the wolverine's incredible sense of smell helps it sniff out its secret stash, even under more than a meter's depth of snow. Then its jaws do the rest, crunching through the frozen meat. Animals have evolved these adaptations to use nature's own freezer. But human food preservation demonstrates much more ingenuity. We needed to replicate what came free in a harsh winter: guaranteed freezing temperatures. We had no problem keeping things chilled in a cold climate, but how could people stop food rotting in the warmer months? In colonial days, a common cause of death was known as the summer complaint, simply due to eating spoiled food. Microscopic bacteria living on food go crazy in the warm.
There's going to be trace amounts of bacteria in absolutely everything. I mean, there's tons on my skin, even at this moment. What will happen is that bacteria will want to multiply and multiply and multiply and eat away at the things, and that can, they're not going to be good for you if you ingest huge amounts. So at the trace level, they're fine. And actually, by having the temperature lower, that sort of inhibits the amount that the bacteria can multiply. So it keeps it at that safe level, rather than allowing them to get to this state where they're going to be causing you illness.
It is recommended to keep food at room temperature for a maximum of 2 hours, but the sooner the better into the fridge.
Fridges are great for keeping food for longer because basically what makes food go bad are either fungi or bacteria that are living on the food start breaking it down. And by refrigerating them, by making them cold, they aren't able to do this breaking down process as effectively. It takes them much, much longer, so it just slows them down, puts them to sleep.
One of our most important foodstuffs that is spoiled quickly when not stored cool is milk. But the most dangerous bacteria to human health that are found in milk are killed when the milk is heated to below boiling point. A groundbreaking discovery. The process of pasteurization, named after its inventor Louis Pasteur, makes fresh milk safe. But that great benefit doesn't last long if the milk isn't then kept chilled. It's safe and a great cool drink. But back in 1600s Europe, a significant development was around the corner, which would change our drinking habits forever. A new trend was taking over, something we certainly haven't lost the taste for today: cold drinks. Europeans simply couldn't get enough of them. This led to the invention of a new cooling technique from a surprising source. Saltpeter was first used for more explosive purposes, like making fireworks and gunpowder. The ancient Chinese invention, fireworks, still handmade like this, is thanks to an explosive chemical concoction that was discovered 2,000 years ago and included saltpeter. But alchemists found that saltpeter could also cause the opposite effect. Mixed with water, it becomes very cold. Long neck bottles were rotated with a solution of water and dissolved saltpeter. This action produces very low temperatures and eventually makes ice. Saltpeter, also known as Chinese salt, helped cool the containers storing history's first recorded ice cream. Cream ice is known to have been served to the English King Charles II in 1671. It was made using a special flavor, orange blossom. Does that mean ice cream is an English invention? Far from it. In fact, the idea goes back much further, to the Romans at least, which would make it Italian. In the early 17th century, cream ice was effectively snow flavored with fruits and juices, probably similar to what we call snow cones or slush puppies today. But it was the French who devised the first recipe of modern ice cream, using dairy. In 1660, the first cafe to open in Paris sold its ice cream to the public. It was made from blending milk, butter, cream, and eggs, which more closely resembles some present-day recipes. It wasn't until the end of the 17th century that there was an explosion of variety, when flavors like chocolate, lemon, and pumpkin burst onto the scene. This was the start of something big. Today, ice cream is sold and served everywhere, no matter how hot or cold the weather. Where would we be without cold drinks and ice cream?
We've developed these sort of tastes for cold things, not only just for keeping things good for longer. Cold drinks are incredibly refreshing on a hot summer's day. Ice cream is amazing. You wouldn't have that unless we'd come up with this sort of refrigeration technology to be able to keep things cold.
It's one of our top tasty solutions for keeping cool, and we just love it, whatever the flavor. In 2019, Americans spent the most in the world on ice cream, enough to mean every American guzzled $209 worth of the stuff. No sign of saltpeter to keep things cool these days. Our ancestors found the white substance was expensive and unsustainable. What else would preserve food cheaply? The major breakthrough came in 1756 at Glasgow University in Scotland, where an academic's chemistry lab was arguably the birthplace of refrigeration. Experimentation found that boiling liquid diethyl ether vigorously made it cool, and it has an extremely low boiling point. It was a huge discovery, the first chemical refrigerant, though its potential wasn't realized straight away. However, today's fridges are based on this principle. Your fridge contains a simple but clever system that uses a chemical refrigerant to transfer heat from inside the fridge out into the air. The refrigerant starts as a warm liquid inside the coil on the back of the fridge. From here, it runs through a valve into the coil on the inside of your fridge. Inside this coil, the pressure is lower. This pressure drop causes the refrigerant to evaporate into a gas. As it travels through the coil, it absorbs heat from inside the fridge, warming the gas up and making the fridge colder. After exiting the fridge, the now heated gas moves through a compressor back into the high-pressure coil on the back of the fridge. As it travels up through the coil on the outside of the fridge, the now liquid refrigerant releases the heat it picked up from inside the fridge into the atmosphere. It arrives back at the valve, and the cycle can begin all over again. That's how it works. And here's how a modern fridge is made. This company manufactures bespoke fridges for the catering sector. Same thing as your fridge at home, just on a bigger scale.
Commercial refrigeration is kind of like what trucks are to the car industry. It's sort of, just a beefed-up version of a fridge.
Bigger, better. tailor-made to suit a restaurant or hotel's particular requirements. It all starts with a computer design.
From the 3D, we generate a DXF, which is a flat pattern of the part we're producing. Once it's designed in 3D, it heads over to 2D and then it gets laser cut.
After they're cut, the pieces go to the assembly section. Here, workers take a shell and install the different coils, valve, and compressor. The electrical work is completed, and the doors are fitted. Finally, the refrigerant is put in and tested. Then the fridge is taken to quality control, systems testing, and off it goes to a restaurant. We were still a long way from modern refrigeration at the turn of the 19th century when we couldn't let go of ice. In 1803, an American dairy farmer wanted to keep his butter fresh in transit to market. His answer was the world's first icebox. It was a simple wooden tub with a smaller tin box inside it, containing the butter. The space between the two containers was stuffed with ice. It successfully kept the farmer's butter cool and fresh until he sold it at market. This was the start of providing us with the ability to transport food by road without it losing quality during the journey, however long the journey. That farmer was onto something. Refrigerated transport today is the backbone of our food distribution industry and is growing globally for both chilled and frozen foods. It means we can all enjoy wide and exotic ranges of food in ways our ancestors could never have imagined, when all we had was a crude icebox. Demand for frozen foods for cooking in restaurants is one of the key drivers. And the global refrigerated food transportation business is growing fastest in the North America region. The idea of global transportation of food was still a fantasy 200 years ago. We just needed a reliable solution for keeping it fresh. The answer lay in the freezing North American winters. It was to kickstart a whole new food industry and change the way people ate: ice harvesting. The story began in 1805 when two wealthy brothers from Boston were at a family picnic, enjoying cold drinks and ice cream. They joked about how these rare luxuries would be the envy of all the people in warmer climates. For Frederick Tudor, one of the brothers, this was the light bulb moment. Knowing that in winter, Boston is covered in snow and ice, Tudor thought about how, further south in the USA, ice was almost unheard of. He decided to create a business by harvesting and then transporting ice to these warmer parts of the country, and beyond to other parts of the world. This 1930s home movie filmed south of Boston gives an idea of what the early ice harvesting operation would have looked like. The harvesters would create more ice by pushing needle bars into fresh snowfall. This action brought the water up, wet the snow, and produced more ice. Ingenious. Then they'd measure and cut the ice into blocks by hand using saws. Soon, Tudor was shipping over 130 tons of ice a year to places like the Caribbean, Europe, and even as far as India. Chilled drinks were his next target. Tudor traveled around the USA to convince bar owners to buy his ice. He taught restaurants how to make ice cream and became known as the Ice King. He also reached out to doctors and hospitals to convince them that ice was the perfect way to cool their feverish patients. And since then, refrigeration has played a vital role in the medical industry. Pharmaceuticals rely on it, to retain the integrity and effectiveness of medicinal drugs in transit and in storage. The worldwide pharmaceutical cold chain logistics business was worth $16.6 billion in 2019. We should also keep some medicines that we've been prescribed in the fridge at home while they're in use.
Certain medicines should be stored in the fridge, and the way in which we can tell whether medicines should be stored in the fridge are usually in the little leaflet which comes with those types of medicines.
Fridges are essential for storing blood, for example, until the next transfusion is needed. Refrigeration is also vital for the latest medical and genetic processes that are helping advance the human race. Human organs are refrigerated until they're required for transplant surgery. Our fertility clinics depend on the refrigeration of donor sperm, eggs, and embryos. This Russian facility is storing stem cells for often life-saving treatments. But back in the 1800s, people hadn't realized just how much they needed ice until the entrepreneurial Henry Tudor made them try it. Once they had seen the benefits of keeping things cold, people couldn't get enough of ice. The ice harvesting industry could now bring ice to your door. Then, with any luck, you had a special new place to store it, an ice box. The Iceman would drive in on a horse-drawn ice wagon. Using ice hooks, he would unload a nice square chunk of ice, haul it into a person's home, and lift it into the icebox. As iceboxes developed, they became desirable pieces of furniture, admired and handsome. Almost every home but the poorest had an icebox. But this insatiable demand for ice came at a cost. In 1907, almost 15 million tons of ice were consumed, nearly triple the amount in 1880. No lake or pond was safe from ice harvesting. However, with industrialization and urbanization, water started to harbor health problems. Harvested ice as a refrigeration agent became risky. Clean, reliable sources were harder to find as natural ice became contaminated with pollution and sewage. Problems first bubbled up in the brewing industry. Soon, the meatpacking and dairy industries began to be affected. So, there were two problems with using plain ice. One was the health risks from ice created from polluted water. The second was that natural ice production was seasonal. We needed a safe, artificial way of freezing that didn't rely on the unpredictable weather. Inventors had spent the second half of the 19th century striving to produce a small, affordable machine that could create ice in the home, in a refrigerator. But who exactly was responsible for this great invention?
I think there's several people who invent the fridge. The basic idea of the fridge is a pretty easily understood one. It's not that different from the natural methods of refrigeration we're used to using.
Apalachicola, a town in Florida, looks very different now to the 1850s when there was a vital development in refrigeration here. Dr. John Gorey invented a groundbreaking machine with a simple system capable of creating ice. However, his machine was not intended to keep food fresh. Instead, his invention was designed to cool down his patients who were suffering with the deadly virus, yellow fever. He had become convinced that keeping them cool would help to cure them. Gorey devised a contraption that injected cool air around his feverish patients. His invention took us another big step closer to the development of the domestic fridge and the concept of air conditioning. Keeping cool is a modern necessity, though today's air conditioning is more directly based on subsequent American research at the turn of the 20th century into humidity control. We can decide how cool we want the atmosphere around us to be using technology originally based on refrigeration, removing the moisture from ambient humid air, which stops us from overheating. But this technology is a long way from what was available in the 1870s. And that was a problem for New Zealand's sheep farmers. These days, New Zealand has 5.5 sheep for every person in its population. Sheep farming is still big business and relies 100% on refrigeration to reach international markets. Back towards the end of the 19th century, its main export, wool, was suffering from a global slump in market value. So farmers wanted to sell their meat further afield as a new income stream. But meat couldn't be shipped long distances because there was no way to keep it fresh. Shippers were open to experimentation with new coolants. And finally, a ship called the Dunedin was refitted with a revolutionary new shipping refrigeration unit. She set off in 1882, loaded with 5,000 frozen animal carcasses, on what was to be the first commercially successful refrigerated shipping voyage the world had ever seen. The foundation for the industry was laid. It was also the foundation of New Zealand's significant freezing and frozen food industries.
The range of people who are interested in this is enormous. There's endless variations on this refrigeration model. It's a good idea, and like almost all good ideas, lots of people have it.
Refrigerated, or reefer container shipping, operates on an epic scale today. The global fleet of these containers specifically was reckoned to total 2 million by 2019. Current technology allows us to carry anything from flowers to food to pharmaceuticals in temperatures that range from a lightly chilled 4 degrees Celsius to a super cold -60 degrees Celsius for things like fish being shipped long distances. Every time we grab a frozen meal out of the freezer compartment, we should take a moment to think about the man who pioneered another chilling aspect to the way we eat, Clarence Bob Birdseye. From 1912, working alongside the Inuits of Canada, he noticed something that would revolutionize the world of frozen food. The fish caught by the Inuit fishermen would freeze almost immediately when pulled from the water in the wintry conditions. Birdseye noted that the fish retained their flavor and texture even when defrosted months later. He experimented with freezing peas. He found blanching peas immediately after picking and then fast freezing them resulted in a frozen pea which was eye-catchingly green when defrosted. Birdseye became obsessed with finding the potential limits to the food freezing process, and the frozen food business was born. This global frozen foods industry was expected to be worth over $156 billion by 2020. By the time Birdseye was dreaming up his frozen peas, we had the ability to stay warm all over our homes with central heating. And there were plenty of devices to celebrate around the house, if we could afford them. For example, we'd gone from a world just a few decades before when only 24% of houses had running water and laundry was a major operation. In 1900, 98% of households still used a scrub board like this to wash their clothes. It was women's work, but everything was changing rapidly. Household appliances were being invented to make life easier, like tumble dryers, electric irons, washing machines, and vacuum cleaners. And the first mass-market electric refrigerator arrived. It had a thermostat and the first ice cube tray. It not only changed the way we store food, it helped modernize and transform society. Later, we began to enjoy the benefits of freezers and microwaves to quickly defrost as technological boundaries stretched further. The impact of all these labor-saving devices, and the fridge in particular, literally changed lives.
So the fridge is one of the cornerstones of a functioning modern economy. It changes the economics, it changes the health, it changes the amount of free time you have. It's just one of the most fantastic inventions of all time.
The biggest effect of domestic appliances on our society was felt by women. In 1900, 5% of married women had jobs. By 1980, that number had jumped to 51%. Thanks, in part, to the introduction of new appliances like the fridge.
It enabled women, because women were usually the ones left in charge of stocking the kitchen and preparing the food. And so that would be something they'd have to go and do daily because food wouldn't keep more than a day or two. But now they could just do the shopping once a week, stick it in the fridge, and then they were free to go and be more productive members of society and work and boost the economy. So it really sort of gave us another 50% addition to the workforce.
In 1900, a woman spent on average 58 hours per week on household chores. By 1975, it was down to just 18 hours. One of the chores that had always taken up so much time was shopping, which had to be done almost daily. This is fundamentally how fridges made such a big difference to women.
If you can't keep things cool, you have to buy things more frequently. You have to shop every other day in order to get the milk, in order to get the butter, in order to get, the things that you want. So it has the capacity to free up time. It's a labor-saving device as well as a way of improving hygiene and making cooking easier.
Unfortunately, fridges were having a huge but sinister impact on the planet that was completely invisible, yet a threat to life itself. In the early days, we used refrigerant liquid gases such as ammonia because it has a low boiling point and it's cheap. But after a while, synthetic refrigerants were seen as the future. The magic answer was known as Freon, but it later became infamous under the abbreviated name CFC, chlorofluorocarbon. CFCs became the standard for almost all domestic refrigerators after World War II. The environment became a top priority in the 1970s and 80s, when CFCs were exposed as greenhouse gases and a threat to our precious ozone layer.
Refrigerants such as CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, are actually pretty bad for the environment. For example, they go up into the stratosphere where they're broken down by ultraviolet light. So CFCs are a carbon atom attached with 2 chlorine and 2 fluorines. When they're broken up by ultraviolet light, you get the chlorine atoms released, and the chlorine atom is no good for the environment.
These CFCs have an enormous effect, which we are witnessing today with climate change.
It breaks down ozone, and ozone is the stuff that keeps us safe, and it goes all around the globe. So what happens instead is you get gaps where there's not enough ozone and ultraviolet light makes its way to the Earth. The consequences of this are, of course, the increased temperature of the Earth. It warms up, the warming that we're told about, but also you get increased ultraviolet light meeting people, so you get increased cancer, increased mutations, and increased blindness.
So the negative impact of fridges is deadly serious. Now, energy-efficient and environmentally friendly fridge designs are the top priority without using CFCs. Ammonia is again being used as a natural refrigerant, along with safer synthetic substitutes.
Don't panic quite yet. There's lots of research going on to find better and more green options to keep things cold, but without harming the planet.
In some countries, we are now much more careful about refrigerator disposal, so that sites like this in landfills will no longer exist. But anomalies remain in global policies on climate change. For example, CFCs are banned throughout the European Union member countries on domestic fridges, but not industrial ones. And fridges using CFCs are not banned at all in developing world countries. However, evidence suggests that it's electricity generation to run our fridges that is the biggest culprit of CO2 emissions, not the CFCs. Scientists have said that refrigeration and air conditioning are responsible for consuming 1/5 of the energy produced globally. So the finger points towards developing yet more energy-efficient coolants than we have already. There's one refrigerator that dwarfs them all. Deep in the heart of Europe, in Switzerland, lies a circular, tubular fridge, which is capable of the most extraordinary scientific research. This fridge measures in at a staggering 27 kilometers in circumference. But it isn't used to store food or beverages. The mega-sized Hadron Collider is the world's largest particle accelerator. By smashing protons into one another at mind-bending speeds in space-like conditions, scientists hope to find answers to some of the most important questions about the origins of our universe. The Hadron Collider is not only massive, but also freezing. A standard fridge chills at around 4.5 degrees Celsius. The Collider can shatter that at minus 271 degrees Celsius, almost absolute zero. As cool as theoretically possible anywhere in the universe. The domestic fridge has also become more futuristic. This high-end machine will feature a touchscreen interface with connectivity to the internet. It will have internal cameras and the ability for you to interact with its features using your smartphone or tablet when you're away from home. A must for control freaks.
I think the smart fridge is a really interesting idea because I think it tells you what you're missing, what you need to replenish, and the things that are going out of date. And it's really interesting from a health point of view because technology is advancing in such a way that actually we can become more accurate about best before dates, because right now it's a guesstimate, and so often we're throwing food out before it really needs to be thrown out. And so smart fridges will decrease waste, and that can only be a good thing.
Managing our shopping lists and knowing exactly what we've got in the fridge will surely make us more efficient.
I'm slightly terrified by the idea of a fridge that's cleverer than I am.
And in our sometimes frivolous world, there have even been calls to celebrate your fridge and remember to look after it. In 1999, one of the fridge manufacturing companies in the United States dreamt up the idea of a National Clean Out Your Refrigerator Day, inside and out. It's true that you might not know what's lurking at the back of your fridge, and there could be cause for concern. Rubber gloves and a bucket of hot soapy water are advised.
I honestly have not cleaned out my fridge for a while, and it was the most disgusting thing I've done for a long time. it's really important to have a clean fridge, and my fridge typically is full of things like jams that are out of date and things like that, and I had a good old clear out, and I feel lighter.
You might need to consider clearing your fridge out so you can keep other things in it. There's no end to people's inventiveness for cold storage. Circumstances can drive people to use their fridge to cool down the most unexpected items.
I used to have a girlfriend who used to put her knickers in the fridge on hot days. So she'd come down and she said it was fantastic. I think it probably is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in the fridge, yes. Darling, there's a pair of knickers in the fridge. Yes, no.
So the weirdest thing that I put was in a freezer were my computer hard drives, because my computer horrendously crashed. And it was making these horrible noises. And actually, by putting it in the freezer, what you end up doing is you sort of contract all the metal in it. And so it allowed it to operate for about half an hour at a time. And then I could extract the data whilst it was running. And so it meant I got to save a lot of stuff that otherwise I would have completely lost.
Refrigeration is also very useful at the wrong end of life, for dead bodies. Human-sized fridges are available to store bodies at the morgue before being disposed of. Refrigeration is very effective in keeping a body intact for a long time. We know this from real-life examples. Take Otzi, for example. He died a mere 5,300 years ago or more, and was preserved naturally in ice until he was discovered by chance in 1991 in his glacial burial site in the Alps. Now he lies in a cold cell in the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Italy, kept chilled and moist as he would have been in the ice. The condition of his body was so good that scientists are able to tell he'd been murdered. And what was in his last meal? It was wild goat. You might not know that the beauty industry recommends cold storage to get the best out of your makeup, especially foundation. The cold temperatures will stop the oils from spoiling.
The fridge that I really want is the makeup fridge, where you can store all your makeup products inside this fridge, and it keeps them cool and working more effectively because they're at the right temperature rather than getting all hot and messy.
Even flowers should be kept in the cold before you're ready to enjoy them in a vase. The chilly environment helps stop them wilting, like they would if left at room temperature. Whatever people choose to keep in their fridge, apparently the contents say a lot about the owner.
See, now that's an interesting question about what has somebody got in their fridge. It's actually quite deeply personal and can be quite exposing about who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what's missing. Is your fridge empty? Does that mean you're quite mean? Is your fridge full? Does that mean you're quite generous? So I think it has all those associations with it.
One thing is for certain, having fridges in our lives has been a game changer.
The fridge is a great invention because it enables ordinary people to eat decently in a way that they weren't able to before.
So by having refrigerators, we've been able to store food for longer, in fact, transport food around the world. It's really completely changed everyone's lives.
From the first prototypes to the latest high-tech designs, the fridge is perhaps the most important appliance in the house. Without it, we might all be living on a diet of pickles and salt-preserved meat. But it's also an invention that changed the way we conduct our daily lives. From the outside, some fridges appear perhaps unremarkable, but what we put inside them has created a whole different world. The latest fridges are becoming more efficient and more environmentally friendly. Who knows what the next generation of fridges will look like? 3/4 of the world's homes have a fridge. All those owners would probably agree that the fridge is one very cool invention.